I'm really excited to be here because I've actually never been to this city before, and this woman right here is actually my great-grandmother who was born in Warsaw. So pretty cool to be here. Pretty amazing. So let's get started. Curious. I like to go to the dictionary. I go to the dictionary for a lot of things, including the word agile. But the word curious, okay, means eager to know or learn something. Now, you've been, learning all day, and some of you yesterday as well. Are you curious right now? Okay, well, some of you are. This is the moment when our dog Max on the right, you know what I'm going to do here? I'm going to show you that this Apple Pencil really works, and I'm going to draw. See, I'm going to be curious. This is Max, and this guy became our second dog. We were just supposed to foster him, but you know what happens when you foster, right? Anyone here foster animals? Do you do that here? I'm sure you do. This guy became Marley, because he's kind of a pain, but he's cute, so we kept him. And just look at Max being so curious. The very first meeting of Marley, right? Really amazing. So this is just, more fostering. My daughter Sophia there is holding a little foster cat. They did not keep the foster cat, but Marley's fascinated, right? Look at him. Very, very fascinated. Marley's not always so curious, though. This was a situation here where my daughter Eva, that's a Great Dane. I don't know if you can't really tell from the picture, but this dog it's like a horse. I mean, it is tall. And, we call this Great Disdain. So he was not too pleased with that. But Eva really likes to have fun with Marley. So if can you find Marley in this picture? Yeah, she has a really good time. And I guess she was curious to see if he'd stay. And in fact, he did stay. It was pretty cool. Now, I have learned from a friend of mine that she actually did A/B testing on this in her slides, and she's proven that cats play better than dogs. So I have to show you a cat. This is my cat. This is Trixie. And Trixie has a way of staying alive. She's just, she is who she is. She's very, very curious, and manages to stay alive. So, the old saying about, cats, right? And curiosity killed the cat. We got to be a little careful because curiosity can get us in trouble. We'll talk about that. This guy here was the CEO of the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, from 2000 to 2004. And he did something extraordinary. Before he became CEO, about 6 months before he became CEO, he got curious, and he went to all the different departments within the BBC, and he asked 2 questions. He would assemble people and ask them questions. He said, what is the one thing I should do to make things better for you, for each one of you? And he collected answers, lots and lots and lots of answers. And then he also said to them, what is the one thing I should do to make things better for our viewers and listeners? He wanted to hear what the people on the ground had to say about this, right? He was demonstrating as a leader being curious. Pretty neat, and an excellent leader. So it just so happens that this the September-October edition of Harvard Business Review is featuring an article by a professor named Francesca Gino called "The Business Case for Curiosity." Okay, I didn't plan this because we planned this speech a long time ago, right? So curiosity seems to be a buzzword these days, and maybe we can learn from Francesca. She has some really excellent research. I recommend you read the article. You can find it for free on the internet, by the way. So here's something she noticed. She surveyed 3,000 employees across numerous industries and found that they regularly were not too curious at work, right? The people that were curious at work were only 25%. Only 25% of the 3,000 polled said that they're regularly curious at work. That's a lot of people not being curious, right? Interesting. She also surveyed those same 3,000 and asked them, do you face barriers to asking questions and learning? And the answer was a whopping 70%. 70% said that they face barriers to simply asking questions within their organization, to being curious. Problems, right? We got problems in these organizations if they're impeding curiosity. So, very quickly, let's take 2 minutes. Find someone next to you and share what you're curious about, what you're most curious about. Let's go. 2 minutes. Find a pair and talk about what you're curious about. Okay, thank you. It sounds like you're pretty curious about some things. Either that or you're talking about the party. So, why am I talking about curiosity? What is the reason I'm talking about curiosity? I have a theory. Okay, I have a theory, I have a hypothesis, if I want to sound fancy. And that is that this thing here, modern Agile, right? And just to be clear to you, let me explain what the word modern means, because sometimes people don't know what that means. You remember in the Agile Manifesto it says we are uncovering better ways, uncovering better ways. Modern is a substitute for that phrase, uncovering better ways. We are simply constantly looking for better ways. There's some stuff that's evergreen in Agile, it'll always be true. There are other things, practices in particular, that tend to get a little bit long in the tooth. They get old, they get out of date. There's better ways to do things. There's simpler, more streamlined, safer ways to work. That's what modern means here. Constantly looking for better ways to do things. My Agile today looks nothing like it looked 20 years ago when I started doing this stuff. It looks nothing like it. So, I wondered, how can we help people become better at Agile and at modern Agile, right? And by the way, today I brought the Polish edition, so I don't know how good this translation is, but it's probably, I think some people worked hard on this, so it's as good as it is for the moment. But I should tell you, we're always curious to get a better version. So if you have a better version, we have a Slack community, and you can improve it. Here's the thing, okay? We'll go back to the English version for a second. I believe that curiosity is critical to being good at all 4 of those principles. That you need to be curious if you're going to be good at all 4 of those principles. If you're going to be a master or talented at modern Agile. That's my hypothesis. And curiosity is actually just one of a few values that I believe are important for getting good at this thing. I'm starting with curiosity. So, let's keep going. We're going to talk about curiosity as it relates to your career, your customers, your craft, and finally, conflict. Okay? Curiosity is critical, I think, to all 4 of those. Starting with career. All right. Anyone ever hear of a book called The Power of Habit? Excellent. It's an incredible book. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend you read it. I know there's so many books to read. Jerry Weinberg, anyone ever hear of Jerry Weinberg? So Jerry once said to me, I said, Jerry, there's so many books to read. What do I read? He said, it's easy. Only read the best ones. Well, that was great. I felt so relieved. Well, I can tell you The Power of Habit is one of those ones, right? It's in there. I would put it way up there. The author is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist named Charles Duhigg. Highly recommend you read it. It actually set me on the path of engineering, which is a Japanese word I made up. Anzen means safety and engineering. It set me on the path to safety, and it is a large part of what modern Agile is today, that one book. In that book, he talks about Keystone Habits. What's a Keystone Habit? A keystone habit is something you do which then generates all these other wonderful things. So let's say you exercise. Maybe if you exercise, that's going to lead to better sleep, to better eating, to better mental acuity, and so on. So let's consider curiosity as a keystone habit. What does it lead to? Well, one thing would be you're open-minded. If you're curious, you tend to be more open-minded, right? You're going to be open-minded to new ideas. And humble. In Francesca Gino's article on the business case for curiosity, she talks about intellectual humility, right? Being humble enough to perhaps consider different ideas. Inquisitive. You're inquisitive. You're asking questions and interested in all kinds of things, just the way that my animals are, especially Max when he meets Marley or walks anywhere outside. Now, if you're open-minded, you tend to lead yourself towards being exploratory. You're exploring, right? You like to explore. If you're humble and you're inquisitive, you tend to be questioning. You're asking questions, right? Coming up with hypotheses. And these things really ultimately lead to learning, right? If you're exploring and if you're questioning, you are learning. Learning is one of the most important things we can be doing in our fields. It's absolutely critical, right? So maybe curiosity is critical for us to become and remain continuous learners. Okay, so I drew this to show that, basically. The roadmap, going from curiosity, starting there, that's where we can start, and we can get better at it, right? We can all decide we're going to get better at being curious. And in so doing, I believe we're going to get to be better learners. We're going to learn more. This guy here, anyone ever hear of him? Okay, maybe you don't know him too well. He is a very famous surgeon in the US. He is a best-selling author of some books, many books. I've only shown 2 of them here. One of them is called The Checklist Manifesto. Brilliant book, absolutely brilliant book, which has helped all kinds of different fields, especially surgeons, to be safer in the operating room. He also has a new book out called Being Mortal. I have not read that one yet. Atul is one of these amazing people. So he gave a TED Talk recently. And in this TED Talk, he said, he admitted that at a certain point he stopped learning as a surgeon. He noticed that he wasn't progressing, that he wasn't learning. And he started thinking about sports, and he started thinking about coaches, and how most sporting teams have coaches, right? And so he wanted to think about maybe he needs a coach. And he talked to his friend, Itzhak Perlman. Ever hear of Itzhak Perlman, the famous violinist? So very, very famous violinist. And he said, Itzhak, how did you improve all throughout your career? And Itzhak said, I have a coach. And he said, who's your coach? He said, actually, it's my wife. My wife is also a violinist, and she constantly watches me, and she constantly gives me advice and tips and things that I might not have been aware of when I'm performing. And she's been a major part of his success in terms of helping him see how to improve. So Atul said, I'm going to get a coach. And he went back to one of his professors and said, could you coach me? Could you literally come to the operating room when I'm doing surgery and coach me? And it was uncomfortable for him, right? Because he's a very, very experienced surgeon. Yet he is one of these people that's thirsty for learning. And sure enough, his professor came and was taking notes during surgery. And they were like a lot of small things, but they were important small things. And he learned from them. And he said that if you want to be great at something, you got to keep learning, got to have a coach. Think about having a coach. I actually think that it's important to get out of your comfort zone on a regular basis. This is me jumping off a cliff into a lake in California. So it was not comfortable, but my daughters had done it, so it was my turn. And I did it. I got a coach a few years ago. His name is Dale, and Dale was very, very helpful to me. It was weird having a coach, but I got one. And he was able to point out things that I had not seen about myself and about my business, and it was excellent. Okay, so I highly recommend you think about how maybe a coach could help you. Now, I don't know if any of you are aware of this. This is another curve. You looked at a curve earlier this morning in Kevin's talk. This is the Virginia Satir change curve. Anyone ever hear of that? Some of you? Okay, so let's talk about this for a minute. I'm going to label some of these things. So the first part of the curve, when you're here, we call this the old status quo. This is how you are. This is your performance level. You're there. There's some ups and downs, but it's basically your level. Up here is the new status quo. Now you're operating at a higher level, right? A significantly higher level. It's not just a little change. This is a big change. The only way you typically get there, it's not a straight line. You rarely see this. Instead, you have to go through this process here, this area that Virginia Satir calls chaos. It doesn't feel too comfortable, and you're far less performant than you were. Your performance goes down. Where you were pretty good at the old status quo, now you're worse. I don't think we go through these curves enough. I know I've gone through a few in my life, and they were profound. One of them is a silly thing, but it was my tennis serve. I don't know if any of you play tennis, but if you play tennis, you can stay at the old status quo for a very long time. Same with ping pong, same with any kind of sport, right? If you want to get significantly better, a lot of times you're going to have to change it up in a big way. Pete Sampras went through this. Pete Sampras is one of the best tennis players of all time. As a junior tennis player, he had a really strong two-handed backhand. It was just strong and powerful. As a junior, you're talking 14 years old. Very strong competitor. And one of his coaches said, let's switch it to a one-handed. He said, long term, the one-handed backhand is going to be a bigger weapon for you. And you're going to be able to go to Wimbledon and dominate there because you need more agility in your strokes. And that one-handed backhand is going to do it for you. Here's this kid, 14 years old. He's really, really good at 14. Guess what happened for the next 2.5 years? He lost. He lost and he lost and he lost. He lost to people he used to beat easily. And everyone was like, what happened to Pete Sampras? Andre Agassi wrote about it in his book. Poor Pete Sampras. That was the time when he just started being bad. He wasn't good anymore. But Pete was in this chaos period here. And he eventually got himself out of it and got this incredible backhand, right? So something to think about is that Virginia Satir change curve, okay? All right, let's move on. So really quickly here, since I don't like to talk about myself too much, but I wanted to exercise your curiosity. Why don't you fire some questions at me? What would you like to know about me? How many animals do I have? I have 3 animals. I used to have 4. The male cat has disappeared about a month ago. What am I curious about? I am curious about tonight's party. What is the product I like the most? Probably this damn thing here. It's just, I do everything. It's even a flashlight. I mean, it does everything. I pay bills with it. I talk to my girlfriend on that. It's anything else? Why did it take me so long to come here? Let's see. I have a very busy schedule. I have 3 daughters. I have 3 animals, used to be 4. I just run a small company and pretty busy, so yeah. But I'll be back because I'm actually leaving tomorrow morning, so I actually barely even saw this place. And that means I have to come back. Any other questions? Do I like Scrum? Scrum is one of those things like from the 1990s, just like extreme programming. They have a enormous impact on the world. And just like extreme programming, Scrum and extreme programming I look at as 1990s ideas of agility. Sorry if that offends you, but I have been relentless about finding better and better ways to be agile. By the way, if you haven't studied Lean deeply, really studied books on Lean, and again, follow Jerry Weinberg's advice, find the best books on Lean and only study those. If you haven't studied Lean in depth, then you're probably missing out in your Agile implementation. Lean completely changed the way I think about Agile, okay? And constant experimentation, constant teaching. We teach courses all over the world. We haven't certified anyone yet, so good on us. I'll pat myself on the back for that one. You're probably thinking I'm such a crazy alien now. But in any event, my view of those things like Scrum and XP are there's some ideas in there that remain true to this day, and there's a lot of stuff that belongs in a retirement home. So that's what I think about that. All right, moving on. Customers. Customers. Curiosity and customers. Okay? Boy, this is important, isn't it? Now, one thing is we got to know if our customers are happy. You know, I ran across this one story in Tom Peters wrote a new book. Tom Peters wrote In Search of Excellence. That's one of those books that's up there that you should read, right? Great book. He wrote a new book. It's called The Excellence Dividend. And he talks about a bank called TD Bank. You hear of that? TD Bank basically doesn't have customers. What? A bank that doesn't have customers? That's crazy. No, they don't want customers. They want fans. Not fans, you know, fans. Like, wow, this place is so great. You got to go to TD Bank. They literally train their staff to create fans. It's like similar to customer obsession from Amazon, right? Fans. How do you create fans? Boy, you got to really know those people, right? You got to get to know them. You got to know if they're happy. So we have to also look at our colleagues, our employees, constantly and know, you know, are they happy? I was talking to Alex earlier, and he was showing me, you know, his product, which is the Happy Force, looking at polling people on a regular basis and asking them questions about their happiness so that you can have a dashboard and look and see, okay, how are we doing? We need to be curious, deeply curious about our customers. However, not creepy curious, right? There are those awful companies where, like, you know, you've turned the app off on your phone and it's still tracking you. It still knows where you're going, and that's horrible, right? That's a level of curiosity that becomes malicious. So curiosity about your customer up to a point, right? In the products I've built for my own company, we have not been curious enough, right? We've built these products and then we didn't know enough about our customers. Twitter did this. Twitter didn't really know much about its customers. It didn't know their birth dates. It didn't know, you know, it didn't have pictures for lots of them. It didn't actively solicit some interesting data that it could have done things with, that it could have used to make the experience better. So curiosity, critical for understanding both your customers and understanding the people you work with. I love this story, the suggestion box. Do you know that Amazon has a virtual suggestion box? In their intranet, on the home page, there's a virtual place to go to make a suggestion. Suggest an idea. And would you know that the idea for Amazon Prime, which is basically their club program where it's free shipping if you pay a yearly fee, and it's an enormously successful program, that came through a suggestion from an employee. I read about that recently and said, boy, I need a suggestion box in my company. I'm going to get on that right away, right? Be curious about the ideas in your own company. There's lots of very smart people in your companies. Harness that by being curious and actively showing it with a suggestion box. I regularly ask people what makes them awesome, right? Modern Agile has this principle, make people awesome. It means give them the services, give them the products that empower them, right? That do wonderful things for their lives. And so I want to know what those are. So I ask people all the time, what makes you awesome? And it's fascinating to hear their answers. When you're writing software, sometimes you think your software is awesome, but it's not. We would do usability evaluations of our software in my office in California. And we were building this e-learning product, and it had been around for, I don't know, a little while, a year or two. And we had videos. We make these videos. They're short 3-minute long videos. You know, a 3-minute video that's well produced, it could take 2 days to make it, 3 days to make it. If it's you know, really high quality and you do several cuts and you change believe me, it's hard work. So we had a 3-minute video in the e-learning. And we were doing a usability evaluation because we believe in regularly getting you know, chances to observe actual students using our e-learning and see what happens. So this fellow comes into our office. Now, we didn't have a fancy wall where I was behind the wall. You know, I was just sitting on a couch, sworn to not say a word. And the usability facilitator was going through an exercise. And he was saying to this gentleman, you know, go through these pages of the e-learning and just interact with them. So this gentleman, he comes to this page, he looks at the page, and then he hits the next button. There's like a, you know, previous and next buttons, okay? And my jaw dropped. I'm like, what? What did he just do? He didn't see this. It's the play button. How did he not see that? He just missed an extremely important video. Oh my gosh. And what that taught me immediately about my customer was we got a usability problem. We got a UX problem. So literally, I think within a day, we built this. You know, and you know, these giant things that are pretty hard to miss. And it said press to play the video. It wasn't blinking, but it was a pretty big letters. And at this point in our history, we just did that work right away and we shipped it. So, I mean, I could go on and on about how you need to spend time with your customers. There's no way, like Toyota's famous for sending an engineer from Japan to California. They got permission from a family to have the engineer kind of be in the car with them anytime they use the car. I don't know how they arranged this, but the family agreed, and this engineer would just observe what it was like for a family to be in a Toyota vehicle and what kind of things happened with coffee and seat belts and, you know, all the different things. Fascinating, right? Intuit has the very famous program which allows you to, they'll buy some software for you. Let's say you're in a store, you're buying TurboTax, right? Which is software to pay your taxes. And in the store, they'll say, oh, you're about to buy this. Hey, we'll buy it for you if we could schedule a time to come and watch you install it and watch you use the product for the first time. How about that? And they're like, sure, go ahead, pay for it. I'll do that. And all the time, engineers get to observe Intuit customers installing the product and using it for the first time. And boy, have they learned a lot from that experience, right? Be curious about your customers. Okay, craft. The craft that we're in, for a lot of us, is software development. Some of us are not doing software, but whatever your craft is, how curious are you about that craft? How much are you improving on a regular basis? Like the surgeon. That surgeon had flatlined. He was in his old status quo. We need to be curious about our craft. Anyone know who this woman is? Who? The first programmer? Okay. Anyone know her name? What? Grace Hopper. That's Admiral Grace Hopper. And she said, the most dangerous phrase is, we've always done it that way. Very, very dangerous. Particularly if you're thinking about that phrase with respect to your Agile process. I see too many people doing their process the same way 10 years later, 15 years later, no changes. Usually that's a sign you're not inspecting and adapting. And that applies to your process too. Okay, I told you earlier I have 3 daughters. All of them have learned how to ride bikes. But I changed it up at a certain point. So this is my second daughter, and you can see here she's learning to ride with training wheels. Okay? Any of you use training wheels to learn how to ride a bike? Okay, a lot of you. What is the essence of biking? When you're biking, what has to be happening? Balance. Balance is key. Do you learn balance with training wheels? No. So right off the bat, you're learning to move you're moving the bike. You can pedal, but you're not learning the essence of biking, which is balance. So some parents and some smart people came along at some point and said, let's do it differently. Let's not use training wheels anymore. Let's go with a push bike. The push bike actually has no pedals, and it has no training wheels. It's just a little bike, very low to the ground. It's so low to the ground that a kid can easily put their legs down and stop themselves. Now, for my third daughter, my youngest daughter, Eva, I didn't want to go out and buy one. We already had a bike. I just lowered the seat and said, don't use the pedals. And here she is. And I love this. This was like the most incredible fortune I ever had at the park that day, because there was a dad trying to help his daughter ride a bike. And he had all of the gear, and he was mucking around with the training wheels. And you can see him right here, right? This poor guy. Well, luckily his back is to us. We don't really know his name or anything like that. But here he is. You see that? Can I, oops, what have I just done? He really was not interested in even talking to me, because at some point, Eva started riding her bike. In one day, she went from starting basically rolling down this hill very gently. I just said, just don't pedal, just learn to balance. She did that, and then started to pedal a little bit. And before you know it, she was riding her bike. I have a whole video about it, but I'm not showing it here today. This guy, helicopter, he was holding her for dear life because she was going to tip over. She hadn't learned any balance. It turns out that the training wheels approach is kind of, it works, but it's slow. I'm interested in accelerated learning, whether that's Agile or biking or whatever. I'm interested in accelerated learning. I was thrilled with the outcome for Eva. She was thrilled too. Look at that smile. That was the moment that she started biking. Okay, so Intuit, back to Intuit, right? They have a party based upon the biggest failure of the year, the failure that taught them the most. They literally give failure awards to people. So they're encouraging people to actually try things. And if they fail and it teaches Intuit a lot, wonderful. Let's celebrate that. Isn't that incredible? So I'm constantly looking for, and that's a cultural thing, right? Culture is super important to curiosity and important to us improving. I am constantly looking for better ways to apply Agile ideas and lean ideas, right? So I look at some people's ideas. Some of them, sometimes they're considered crazy, sometimes they're not. There is a guy named John Alspaugh. He was, I think, the CTO of Etsy. Anyone hear of Etsy? It's a creative marketplace, right? He was an excellent CTO of Etsy for many years, and that place was run really, really well. They were famous for having blameless retrospectives and talking all about that. At Etsy, if you fail, they give you the biggest failure gets the 3-arm sweater award. Very similar to Intuit. The 3-arm sweater is you accidentally knit a 3rd arm onto the sweater and you have 3 arms. So it's a famous story. John Allspaw says, I don't like the 5 whys. Now you say, what did he just say? The 5 whys are bad now? Well, John has a reason for explaining why he doesn't think the 5 whys are that productive. Now, I know people that have had, made real improvements using the 5 whys. But if you read John's article, just look it up on Google. It's called The Infinite Hows. He says it's better to ask how and to get a very rich narrative of what happened by asking how and figuring out lots and lots of different people's perspectives of how did this problem occur. Not why, but how did it occur. So it's an interesting thing, right? You may or may not agree with it. I've been toying with it. I don't like the word infinite because it sounds like a lot of work. I want to call it the 100 hows because that sounds more manageable. But it's again, me being curious about my craft. Here's someone, I don't even know him, I never met him, but I'm curious about this. I say this all the time, and I tweet it, and I put it on LinkedIn. Drop a ritual, rule, or tool, and see if your agility improves. Get rid of something and see what happens. There's a high school football coach in Arkansas, one of the southern states in America, right? High school football. And he read an article by a professor that said, statistically in football, it never makes sense to punt. Punting is when you haven't gone 10 yards. You're supposed to go 10 yards. If you can't go 10 yards, you got to punt. Well, you don't have to punt. The rules don't say you have to punt. Most teams do. They punt the ball, and it goes all the way to the other side, so the other team gets the ball. But you don't have to. On the 4th down, you can go for it. And this professor said, mathematically, statistically, based on all this data I observed, it never makes sense to punt. So this guy decided to try it. And he took a team that was not good, and they became the state champions. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why, but he dropped something. If you're going to be curious about your craft, try things, experiment with things. See what you could do. Here's an experiment I did in 2007 with my team. We dropped sprints. We called them iterations. Extreme programming calls them iterations. I don't care if it's from extreme programming or Scrum. The point was, at that point in time, we'd been doing them for 8 or 9 years already. We'd been teaching others how to do them. We thought this is like critical to being agile, is doing time boxes, whether you call them sprints or iterations. But at a certain point, we said, let's experiment with not doing them and see what happens. And it turned out it was wonderful. It turned out we were able to go even faster. There was less friction, less time spent doing certain things, and we were shipping quicker. We liked it. It worked for us in that context. It might not work for you. However, if you experiment and it doesn't go well, hey, you could have a failure party. And then you could go right back to the old way. But I would encourage you to get curious about experimenting, particularly with simplifying your process and streamlining your process. We, at some point, were not very good about measuring usage in our product. Definition of done, we've shipped it, it's done. No, it isn't. It's not done if no one's using it. It's not done if you don't even have usage metrics to show that people care, right? So we made a feature, it was a resume feature, right? When you get back into our e-learning, you can resume from where you left off. Pretty basic, but people wanted it and it wasn't there yet. So we built that feature and we put statistics, we measured statistics and said, wow, look, 36% of people are using this. Week in and week out, those numbers held. So that's good evidence. We've also tried other things. This is a fake feature. I came back from a conference and the CEO of Intuit was saying, we did this thing, it was so cool. When people are filling out their taxes, if they have a question, they can ask other people, other users of TurboTax. Literally on the web page, they can just have a conversation. And my lead programmer said to me, yes, I've used that. The other day I was filling out my taxes and someone answered my question, another user. I was like, that's awesome. We should build that in our e-learning. But at that point, I had basically studied Lean Startup. And if you haven't studied Lean Startup, I highly recommend you read that book. See, I am adding to your book list. You're going to hate me. That book says validate or invalidate ideas as rapidly and as efficiently as possible. So capital efficient experimentation. Capital efficient. I'm not spending a lot of money. So I said, all right, we're not going to actually build a feature. Let's put it in as a feature fake. And so it said on the top of the page, it said, 16 users from 4 countries are online right now. Join the group chat. There was no group chat. There weren't 16 users from 4 countries. This was BS. And we only put it up for a short period of time, and only 100 students got to see it. And we didn't test drive it or refactor. We slammed it into our web template. But we put some data behind it. So we wanted to know who clicked on this thing. And we got that data. And the data said, so if you clicked on join the group chat, it would bring up a dialog box. And you could opt out of the dialog box. I'm not going to force anyone to take the survey, right? I respect people's ability to say, I'm not taking a stupid survey. So out of 100 people that saw this, 22 clicked on it, which is pretty high rate. Only 14 took the survey. Right, the survey, the new group chat feature may be available soon. How likely would you be to use it? And out of that, only 6 people said that they were likely to use it. From idea to production to getting this data, you're talking about 3 hours. And in 3 hours, I basically invalidated the idea to some extent. I said, that's not compelling enough to build it. Now, in hindsight, I could argue a bunch of things. I could have said, well, I could have A/B tested that verbiage, right? Because there's language there. It says 16 users from 4 countries are online right now. Maybe a different wording would have led to a different result. Or maybe 100 people was not enough to be statistically valid. Maybe we needed 1,000 people to see this message to get better data. I don't know. But at the time, that's what we did and decided not to build the feature. So in 3 hours, we killed the idea. I'm pretty glad we did because I don't think it would have been that great of an idea, right? I was really high on the idea at first because I'd just come back from a conference. So it's important to bring curiosity to your craft, to your user interactions, right? As much as you can, be curious about your users. Okay, conflict is the final topic here. One of the things that I've learned over the last several years is that curiosity is extremely helpful when it comes to conflict. Okay? So I'm going to tell a quick story about Jerry Weinberg. Jerry was working in Los Angeles and was helping a very large company with something. And he came back from work one day from the client site, came back to the office, and he gave a very large bill, lunch bill, and handed it in to get reimbursed. At a certain point, his boss saw it and got kind of angry. The boss didn't get angry with Jerry, but the boss was like, what is this? Why is there such a large bill here? It's $200 for a lunch bill. Who has a $200 lunch? So he calls Jerry in to his office. And instead of getting mad, he said, Jerry, I've been all over this area eating lunch, and you must have gone to some really fancy place or something. Well, how did you come to have a $200 lunch? That's amazing. And Jerry said, oh, well, actually, I took the client out because we were celebrating something that we accomplished. And the way Jerry describes the story, his boss never got angry at him, just handled the situation by getting curious about the nature of this $200 bill. Very simple little story, but very important, right? We have an unlimited vacation policy in my company. And there's a fellow who's relatively new to the company. He's been with us about a year, maybe less. And we looked at his calendar, and he had blocked out a lot of weeks for vacation. And I'm like, WTF, WTF, WTF. This was really maddening because there's a long story about this unlimited vacation policy. We had that for years. Many years ago, an employee abused it. We got rid of it. So we'd only recently brought it back. And here we got someone doing this thing to us. So I decided to get curious and not angry. And I talked to this individual. And I said, what's going on? It seems like you need a lot of vacation. Is there any problems occurring? He said, yeah, well, actually my mother's having surgery. And like one of the weeks was like, he was needing to be with his mother on a Monday, but he couldn't go to the client. He travels to this client. He could only be in our office from Tuesday to Friday. And I'm like, that's fine. That's work. I mean, why did you block out the whole week? You're basically with your mom on Monday, and then you're at our company where you can be productive from Tuesday to Friday. So in other words, the representation of his calendar was not actually accurate to the number of days he was really taking off. And just by being curious and not angry, our relationship remained really solid, and we figured it out. So one of the things that I found in meetings is that if I'm trying to deal with people that have conflicts in meetings, it happens, right? People get angry at each other in meetings. Sometimes they get pissed off about something. We started to say, let's make some meeting agreements. And this was largely inspired by Charles Duhigg, the guy that wrote The Power of Habit. He wrote another book called Smarter, Faster, Better, where he observed some things at Google. And Google is really serious about psychological safety. So at Google, these are some things they do during meetings. They encourage everyone to contribute. They listen to one another. They repeat and review people's points. They avoid dominating or interrupting. And last but not least, they're actively trying to be curious, caring, and open-minded. Now, in the book, they don't phrase it exactly like this. We've wordsmithed this a lot within my company. This poster is free to download on modernagile.org, and I recommend you look at it and then make your own. Customize it to your team's desires. But what it does is it says, if we're going to have a meeting, let's have a productive meeting, where people contribute and are encouraged to contribute, where we listen to each other, we don't dominate and interrupt, and where we're curious, especially in the face of someone saying something we don't like. If someone says something we don't like, get curious about it, ask questions, be inquisitive, rather than getting angry. So, to summarize my talk, I believe that curiosity is a superpower. I believe it's the kind of thing that we really need to cultivate in ourselves, for our careers, for our customers, and our colleagues at work, right? For our craft, and for our conflicts, whether that's at home or at work, right? Cultivate curiosity because it's a superpower, right? When I have interactions now where something, sometimes employees or subcontractors do things that are just, you scratch your head like, I can't believe this. And then if you just get curious, it works itself out really nicely. So curiosity is potentially a superpower that I think would be very helpful for us to power our Agile and our practice. If you want to learn more, you can go to modernagile.org or use the Modern Agile hashtag to look at what we're talking about these days. We talk a lot about psychological safety and all kinds of other things. And there's a Modern Agile show on YouTube that you can watch some episodes on that. And that brings us to the end. I think we have, do we have any time, or should we let folks go to this party?
Yeah, let's thank Joshua